In this week's programme, we talk to Gabi Lewis, who is co-CEO at Exoprotein. Now, Exoprotein are responsible for cricket-based exo bars. Yes, you heard me right, they contain cricket flour. When he's not on duty at Exoprotein, Gabi can be found in the gym, training as a competitive powerlifter. Gabi was born in Israel and raised in Scotland and moved to the US to attend Brown University, where he developed his passion for all things insect. So let's join Alan and Gabi in the studio now to find out why we can and maybe should be eating crickets.
Good morning, Gabi, and welcome to the Low Carb Paleo show. You and I met at the Paleo FX Austin 2014, and I was really intrigued about your product, being that I'm always intrigued with new ideas. I have to admit that thinking about eating bugs and stuff, I was a little cautious, but I'm a curious guy, and in many ways, actually. So I actually dared to taste a little piece, and it tasted good. Then I tasted another one, and that was it. I was hooked. So for me, what worked for me, going beyond the cricket part, was the fact that it tasted great. And I think that's your selling point in all of these. So I want to welcome you to our show. And do you want to give us a little background, you and your partner?
Yeah, firstly, thank you very much for having me on the show. It's an honor to be here. My background is I grew up in Scotland and I came to the US around 5 years ago to study at Brown University, where I studied mathematical economics and philosophy. And while there, I met a guy named Greg Sevitz, who was studying neuroscience and creative nonfiction writing. And the two of us started working on this idea together as a side project. The mission of our company, which is called Exo, is to normalize the consumption of insects. And so the overarching argument is that insect protein is exceptionally nutritious and very sustainable. So the two of us started working this idea together during our final year of college, around a year and a half ago, and then launched formally right after graduating exactly a year ago.
So what was your path from studying at Brown into creating your exo bar?
So while I was studying at Brown, I was absolutely obsessed with fitness, nutrition. I was crossfitting, I was competing in powerlifting, and I realized that, to be blunt, most protein bars suck. The majority of them are really just candy bars disguised as health food, and those that are actually good for you, they tend to taste pretty horrific. So I decided as a side project to start making my own. So I would combine almond butter with some dried fruits and raw cacao and coconuts. And at the time I was using some whey protein isolate, experimenting with hemp and various proteins. And I was just trying to create a better protein bar. And then Greg, who became my co-founder of Exo, happened to attend a conference at MIT on climate change and resource scarcity. And somebody there was talking about how the population is growing so fast and we're going to be unable to feed ourselves into the future. However, there is this one protein source which is very underutilized and requires a fraction of the resources compared to any other protein source, and that's insects. So Greg came back from this conference, and we were roommates at the time, and he saw me making these protein bars, and he said, what if we put insects in there? And like anyone, when you first hear that idea, I thought he was crazy. And I was like, why would we eat insects? That's disgusting. It makes no sense. But he started convincing me, and he started explaining to me that insects are a complete protein with all the essential amino acids. Crickets, for example, have twice the iron of beef gram per gram, more calcium than milk gram per gram. So they're really unbelievably healthy. And of course, they're very sustainable. So crickets produce 80 times less methane than cattle. They require a fraction of the land, feed, and resources that any other protein source requires. So it all just made sense, and this light bulb went off, and we started incorporating crickets into my protein bars. So the first step was we ordered 2,000 live crickets from a farm in Louisiana, and we learned online how we could process those crickets into a kind of basic protein powder. And you basically freeze them, you roast them at a low temperature to remove the moisture, and you grind them up. And what you have is this powder that's around 70% protein by dry weight, all the essential amino acids, high in omega-3s, iron, calcium, And we put that into my bars. And we served them to some friends. We took them to a local CrossFit gym. And we got just this amazing feedback from everyone and very little of the kind of gross out factor that we were expecting. And so at that point, we realized maybe there's something here. And so when we graduated from college a couple of months later, we launched a Kickstarter campaign. And we tried to receive pre-orders, and we succeeded in receiving around $55,000 worth of pre-orders from over 1,200 individuals in less than 30 days. And there's your proof of concept. So at that point, we were like, all right, let's make it real. Let's turn this into a business. And so we did.
Kickstarter is a great marketing way to figure out if there's a market for your product.
It's the best way. I mean, you see if people are willing to pay for it. And that's all the validation you need.
Yeah, because at that time, you didn't have any followers whatsoever. It was a brand new idea. So for people to pick up on this concept and actually be willing to put money behind it, that's pretty cool. How do you say, confirmation that the idea is going to work.
Absolutely. And we had no idea it was going to work. I mean, we set a goal of $20,000 of pre-orders, and we met that goal in less than 3 days and then went on to triple that goal. So it far exceeded our expectations. It was a very exciting few weeks.
Yeah, I'm sure. How did you come up with the name?
Well, actually, it's a funny story. Initially, the company was called Ento. Entomophagy is the study of insect consumption, entomology, the study of insects. However, we couldn't get the trademark for Ento in Europe and didn't want to limit ourselves solely to the US forever. So we had to change our name, and we're trying to find kind of a short, snappy name that had some kind of relation to what we were doing, but it didn't have to be explicit. And the exoskeleton is what defines an insect. It's a kind of outer chitinous layer of the insect. And so we came up with Exo, short for exoskeleton, but also just a nice, short, snappy name that sounds kind of fitnessy that people can get behind.
Nice, thank you.
It's a good name, actually. Catchy.
Yeah, it's short to the point, and it actually, for people that know a little bit about this kind of things, it actually describes your product pretty much.
Right.
Yes. Gives people a bit of ownership, doesn't it? Because, if they know, they're in the know.
Exactly. Yeah. It's kind of the layer beneath that they feel like they discovered it.
Can you tell us about your line of product? I believe you have 3 different flavors now.
Yeah, we currently have 3 flavors, all of which have a nut butter base. So one is almond butter based, one is cashew butter based. The third, which isn't paleo, is a peanut butter base. And we combine those nut butters with dried fruits and a variety of spices. So the cacao nut, for example, is almond butter, dates, coconut, touch of raw honey, some sea salt, and crickets, of course.
Yeah.
And so all three bars are pretty nutritionally dense, so they're fairly high calorie, high fat from the nut butters. You'll have 10 grams of protein, which is a complete protein, animal quality protein, all the essential amino acids, and around 13, 14 grams of sugar per bar from the dried fruits and the raw honey.
I like the chocolate, but my favorite is the cashew ginger. I love ginger, so.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite too. It's the most savory, the least sweet.
Yes. And I agree with you that the peanut butter is now paleo. So we'll keep that in mind for the people listening out there.
It is most people's favorite, though. It tastes exactly like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So if you're looking for a slightly healthier version, still gluten-free.
I have a silly question for you, Gabi. How many crickets are there per bar?
There are roughly 40 crickets per bar, 40.
Wow. That's a lot of creepy crawlies in there.
It's a lot of crickets. However, they are ground into a fine flour. So there are no legs, no antennae, nothing whatsoever that would let you know that you're eating crickets. Just this fine butter.
I kind of miss the crunchy from the legs.
Yeah, there's some crunch from the nuts in there, so you could pretend it's like if you wanted to.
Right. Are your bars organic and GMO free?
They are, yeah. Not every single one of our ingredients is currently certified organic. We're actually going through the process of figuring out what it means for a cricket to be organic. So our crickets are fed a certified organic feed. However, there are no guidelines yet for the raising of crickets in an organic manner in terms of how much light they get and whether they're allowed to roam freely in the outdoors. All these regulations that exist for organic cows, for example, don't really apply to crickets, but that's like the closest thing there is. So it's a pretty funny process figuring this out.
Yeah, they're free roaming, grass fed, all that.
Omega-3 enriched. No, I mean, actually, our crickets are not grass-fed right now, and crickets are omnivores in nature. So it's not like cows where they should be eating grass and then you feed them grains and it screws up their insides and destroys the omega-3 to 6 balance. Crickets, actually, you can feed them grains and it doesn't destroy the fatty acid composition because they are omnivores and they have evolved to eat pretty much anything, even each other, actually.
Speaking of beef comparing to crickets or crickets to beef, what are the advantages of crickets over beef in the sense of nutrition content, environment, benefits, and so on and so forth?
Sure. So I'd first like to say I'm by no means arguing that the world should stop eating beef and just eat insects all the time. So what we're trying to do is not to create a world where everyone just eats insects every day. We're trying to create a world where insects are a viable alternative to beef, to soy, to hemp, to chicken, to whatever. So we're just suggesting it as a kind of supplement to whatever you're already eating. To compare it to beef directly, crickets are a higher percentage protein by dry weight, and it's a comparable quality protein, so the amino acid profiles are pretty similar. In terms of micronutrients, by dry weight, crickets have twice the iron of beef. So they're definitely as good as or better than beef as a protein source. In terms of the environment, they really trump beef there pretty much on every level. So crickets produce 80 times less methane than cattle. They require, I think, around 10 times less feed than cows do to yield an equal quantity of protein. And if you combine the fact that they need less feed and less water, require less space, and produce less methane, then the UN estimates that taking all of that into account, it is 20 times more efficient to raise a cricket for protein than beef in terms of resources that go in and grams of protein that come back out. So it's really a superfood on every level.
So it's a good, very good product for us to eat as far as source of protein, but it's also very good for the environment as well.
Correct. It's good for everyone.
That's great. That's great. That's all we want. We had talked to one of your competitors a couple of days ago, and in my mind, he has the best quality, other than crickets, protein bar. But when I hear what you say about cricket, it makes a lot of sense as well. So I like that.
It's just an alternative.
So you have 3 flavors right now. Are you planning new flavors? Or you have something else brewing right now, so to speak?
Yeah, we have a lot brewing right now. We are doing R&D in a variety of new flavors, which we're pretty excited about. We'll probably release 2 new flavors within the next couple of months. And we're also working on some more savory bars, as well as a few other products down the line, which I'll keep you in the loop.
As a chef, I was intrigued by the fact that you hire a chef to create nutritional and the taste profile. I think that was a great idea. Who is your chef and how did you find him?
Sure. So we realized that if we are to be successful in convincing people to eat insects, then they have to taste delicious. And taste is number one. So we thought, all right, how do we go about making these bars delicious? I have no background in cooking. My co-founder doesn't either. So we tried to find the best chef we could. And through a friend of a friend, we were put in touch with a chef named Kyle Connaughton, who was previously the head chef of R&D at the Fat Duck in England, which for a few years was actually ranked the #1 restaurant in the world. And so he had actually experimented with insects in the past. And more broadly, insects have been kind of percolating in the fine dining world for several years now. So Noma in Copenhagen, which is currently the #1 restaurant in the world, regularly serves a cricket soy sauce, for example. And so he came at this from a culinary and fine dining perspective, was very excited about the idea and joined our team. And so he's head of product development and R&D on the cricket flour and its various applications. And he has been successful in making these bars delicious, which is, as I said, key in changing hearts and minds.